Richard Hale stood in his glass office 41 floors above Manhattan, staring at a phone that had not rung in 7 days. His daughter, Sophia, 22 years old, heir to a $2.8 billion logistics empire, had landed in the Philippines a week ago for what was supposed to be a 2-week punishment trip. She had not called once. Not a text, not a photo, nothing. Outside his window, 60 floors of glass reflected a city that had never once told him no. Richard had built his company on control. 600 warehouses tracked in real time, every shipment visible on a screen, down to the minute. But his daughter, the one thing that mattered more than any of it, had simply gone dark somewhere on an island he could not even find without help. He picked up the phone and called the last number he had for her. Disconnected. His hands, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, were shaking. He tried the embassy in Manila next. They had no record of an American citizen named Sophia Hale requiring assistance, which should have been a relief. It wasn't. He cancelled 3 board meetings that morning without explanation, something his assistant would later say she had never once seen him do in 9 years of working for him. Before we go further, drop Pinoy in the comments if you believe silence can mean something has changed for the better, not the worse. Subscribe if you want to see exactly what Richard found when he finally got on that plane. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia had thrown a wine glass at a caterer for arriving 4 minutes late, a video that hit 2 million views before Richard's PR team could bury it. Richard had watched it 11 times, seeing less of his daughter each time and more of a stranger he had accidentally built. Her mother had died when Sophia was 9, and Richard had answered grief the only way he knew, with money, private jets, instead of bedtime stories. By 22, she had never once heard the word no and had it mean anything. The final straw came at a company gala where a drunk Sophia called a Filipino waitress the help and told her to smile more. The woman, 54 years old, said nothing and walked away. Richard followed her into the kitchen to apologise on his daughter's behalf. She waved him off. "She is not cruel, sir," the waitress said. "She has just never been told no." Richard stood there holding a question he had never once asked in 22 years. What had he actually taught his daughter? That night, Richard made one phone call to his longtime housekeeper, Corazon, who had worked in his home for 18 years and rarely spoke unless spoken to. "Corazon," he said, "I need your help." Corazon listened to everything. Then she said 5 words that changed the plan entirely. "Send her to my sister." Sophia's reaction was volcanic. "The Philippines? That's not even a real destination. My friends are going to Ibiza." Richard held firm for the first time in 13 years of parenting. "You leave Sunday. No credit cards, no assistant, 2 weeks." Sophia screamed that she would never forgive him. "Fine," she said, voice cracking despite herself. "Send me away like everything else you don't want to deal with." Richard said that was a risk he was willing to take. Sunday came. Corazon went with Sophia only as far as security, then flew home herself, confident her sister would take it from there. Richard did not go to the airport at all. He told himself it was a shareholder call, but the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He could not watch her walk away angry at him and not change his mind. Corazon called from the gate. "She didn't look back once, sir," she said quietly. Richard said nothing for a long moment. "Good," he finally said. "That's good." What Richard did not expect was the silence that followed. Sophia landed in Cebu, was taken by ferry 2 hours south to Estrella's home village in Bohol, and settled in for what should have been 2 quiet weeks. On the 3rd day, she asked Estrella if she could help at a small community centre further up the coast, teaching children who had never had a foreign visitor stay this long before. Estrella said yes. The centre had no cell signal, only a shared radio for emergencies, so Sophia began checking in every few days instead of every few hours. 12 time zones away, Richard heard nothing at all and had no way of knowing why. By day 5, Richard had stopped sleeping. He called the only number he had for Estrella 3 times with no answer, then found himself pulling up his own warehouse tracking software at 2 a.m, watching 600 shipments blink across a screen in real time, wondering why the one thing he actually needed to locate had no signal at all. He hired a local fixer through a contact in Manila. The fixer's first question cut through Richard's composure entirely. "Sir, when did you last actually hear her voice?" Richard opened his mouth to answer and realised he could not remember. Not her laugh. Not an argument. Not even a proper goodbye. On the 7th morning, Richard's assistant burst into his office holding a printed news article from a small regional outlet in Bohol. Estrella had gone to check on Sophia after 2 missed radio check-ins and found she had left 3 days earlier with a group of volunteers for an overnight outreach trip to a farther, more remote barangay, telling no one exactly where. The headline made Richard's blood run cold. American volunteer reported missing by local barangay officials near Loon. Richard did not finish reading the article. He was already calling his pilot, already pulling his coat off the back of his chair, already leaving a stack of quarterly reports untouched on a desk that had never once, in 15 years, seen him leave mid-morning. 14 hours later, Richard landed in Manila and took a domestic flight to Bohol, still in the same suit he'd worn to the office. Somewhere over the South China Sea, he realised he had not eaten in over a day and did not care. He arrived at the small barangay hall just before sunset. A police officer looked at his passport, looked at a photo of Sophia on Richard's phone and went pale. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "you need to come with me." Richard's legs nearly gave out as they drove down a dirt road toward the coast, past rice paddies turning gold in the dying light. He prepared himself for the worst thing a father can prepare for. The car stopped outside a small concrete building with a hand-painted sign he could not read. Children's voices carried from inside. Laughing, singing, off-key, joyful. The officer opened the door. Richard stepped through it and stopped breathing entirely. There, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 11 barefoot children, hair tied back with a piece of string, skin sunburned, hands covered in paint, was Sophia. She was teaching them how to write their names in English. She looked up, saw her father standing in the doorway in his Manhattan suit, mud already climbing the edge of his leather shoes, and the marker fell out of her hand. "Dad?" Her voice cracked on the single word. Every child in the room turned to look at the stranger filling the doorway. Sophia rose, slowly, as if standing too fast might make him disappear. "How did you—" She stopped. Her eyes went to the folded newspaper, clipping still in his hand, and something in her expression shifted from confusion into a fear Richard had never once seen on his daughter's face.